Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Getting Dirty in the Neverwinter Nights 2 Toolset. Alright, we are still playing Path of Evil Remastered, and we did run into another minor bug. This time we are in the Akana Peaks area. We were down here in the southwest. There is a anti-slaver camp down there with a bunch of anti-slavers in there. We killed them all, and they all have drops, and one of them has a unique item on him that has a minor bug on it, and the item in question is in this little loot bag right here. So we're going to go into that and take a closer look. The item in question is this item here, the Helm of Graham the Mouse. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this thing. It has some item properties. As you can see, it has damage reduction 2, and it's only usable by a paladin. That's not an issue. And then you're also going to see this resistance piercing 5. That, I can tell you right now, is a bug in the main game. Resistances only apply to the elemental type damages. So, fire, cold, acid, positive, negative, divine, that type of damage. When you're dealing with piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage, that's where damage reduction comes into play. Okay? So, that being said, we're going to have to fix this blueprint because this resistance piercing is bugged. And this is kind of deceiving too. If you actually equip this item and you take damage from a piercing weapon in game, you'll see a message saying you resisted 5 points of piercing damage. But I can tell you right now, you actually didn't. You're still going to take that 5 points of damage on your character. It's not blocking anything. It's only giving you a message saying that, and it's lying to you. So, but there is a way to fix this. We need to change this damage resistance piercing into a damage reduction that's going to block piercing damage, okay? And at the same time, we're going to try to keep this damage reduction too, but we're going to have to finagle this a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the tool set and we're going to get rid of this resistance piercing item property, and we're going to add another damage reduction property into this and fix this blueprint. Now, this is not an issue with Path of Evil. This is an issue with the base Neverwinter Nights 2 game. There's a lot of items in the game that unfortunately have damage resistance with piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning in them. All those blueprints are going to have to be fixed, but we're going to take it one step at a time. So let's just fix this blueprint first. All right. So let's just go ahead in the tool set and see what we can do about it. And here we are in the tool set. We're currently in the Poe Stronghold folder, and we have the Akana Peaks area up right now. We are down in the corner where I mentioned there's a anti-slaver camp down there. And the character in question that has the item is this guy right here. As you can see, he's actually wearing the Helm of Graham the Mouse. So if we have him selected and we click on his inventory tab, you can see right down here, he's got the Helm of Graham the Mouse equipped in his head slot. If we go to the edit button here and take a closer look at things, yes, there it is in his head slot. If we move this over to his inventory and unequip it and then click on it, now we can come over here to this properties tab right here, and we can see all the properties for that specific item. So if we scroll down here in the list, and you will see an area called damage reductions, and you can see there is a damage reduction of 2 that we saw in the examination pane when we looked at it earlier. And if you look down further, you're going to see a properties area right here, and you can see use limitations for paladin. And then there's another one for damage resistance piercing 5. Alright. Now, we could potentially fix the issue with this particular helm on the instance of this character and be done with it, but unfortunately, if we do it like that, it's not going to be save game compatible. So I want to make it save game compatible, and that's going to require making a new blueprint, and we're probably going to end up making a script as well so we can fix it on the fly. But yeah, if you want to fix it just like this, what you can do is come up here to damage reduction in here and click this little ellipse right here, and you can add all the new stuff right in here as far as damage reductions. And if you want to get rid of this damage resistance piercing one, same thing. You come down here, you click this ellipse right here, and just click on the damage resistance piercing, and then hit remove property, and it'll get rid of that for you. So that'll only fix the blueprint that's residing on this character. It won't fix the global blueprints that reside with the base game. So keep that in mind. So if there's another instance of this Helm somewhere else in this entire module somewhere, it's still going to have the problems in it if you don't fix the actual blueprint or the instance on each character. But that's why I kind of want to make a new blueprint and then use a script to fix it from there. Alright, so let's get out of this. And we're going to go ahead and go with my second choice and make a brand new blueprint. So if you come over here to your blueprint tab, and up across the top here you're going to see all these little icons with different tabs right here, like you got encounters and triggers, placeables and stores, doors, creatures, and then the one we want to deal with is the items tab, because this is an item. A helm is an item. So we're going to filter for that specific item by a unique name, and it was called Graham the Mouser. So let's do a filter for the word mouse, M-O-U-S-E. Alright, there they are. There's actually Armor of Graham the Mouse, and Helm of Graham the Mouse, and Mantle of Graham the Mouse. But the one we're going to be dealing with is the Helm of Graham the Mouse. Now, in this form, just like this, without underlines in them, or they're not bolded, these are stock blueprints with the base game. I tell you right now, try not to edit anything with the stock blueprints. If you want to fix something in one of these blueprints, and you try to always make a new blueprint, okay, and then do the fixes in that new blueprint, and we'll use that from now on. That's exactly what we're going to do. If you click on the item in question right here, which is this Helm of Graham the Mouse right here, and then right click on it, you're going to see an option here for copy blueprint, and you can set up as a module or a campaign blueprint. And there's another one down here called create blueprint, and it's also for a module or a campaign. We don't want to create a brand new one. That means it's going to be starting from scratch, and you got to set all these properties yourself. What we want to do is we want to just copy the blueprint. So it's going to have all the properties of the original item, and we're just going to change a couple things. That's what we want to do. Now, the one we want to do is a campaign one, but let's make them both so you guys can see what the difference is when we make a module one and a campaign one. So let's make a copy of a module one. Alright, let's bring that blueprint tab back out, and let's pin it out so we can see this thing without it going back. When you make a module blueprint, it creates one, and it's going to be in this dark bold typeset right here. Okay. Now let's go back to the original one again, the Helm of Graham the Mouse, and let's right click on it again, and let's copy blueprint, and this time we're going to make a campaign version of it. Now in a campaign version, as you can see, it's got an underline underneath it. So if you see this, this means this blueprint is residing in the campaign folder when it's got an underline under it like that. If you see it where it's bolded like that, that means that blueprint is residing in the module folder. And in these, like I said, in these other blueprints where they are not bolded and they do not have a line underneath them, those are the stock blueprints in the actual install folder for the data. Okay, try not to change those. Now, I think I might have mentioned this in previous episodes, but there's an hierarchy of what overrides what folder. In this particular case, campaign files will always override files that have the same name in the module folder, and they'll always override the files in the install folder, okay, the base games. So this blueprint in the campaign folder is the one we want to change, and on top of that, it's going to be save game compatible. Any files that are in the module folder are not save game compatible. Okay, so we're going to ignore this one that's residing in the module folder. We want to use this one here, the one that resides in the campaign folder. That's the one we're going to make all our edits on. So if you come over here to the properties, and let's open this up so we can see a little bit better here. We want to come down to the damage reductions, and then further down you're going to see the item properties. Okay, this is the same stuff we were looking at before when you opened up the inventory of this character right here, and you could have changed these things in the character itself, but here we're dealing with a whole new blueprint. Alright, now when you first make a new blueprint, you can see that the tags are the same. Alright, this tag is the same as this one and this one. Okay, but if you look over here in the resref, you can see these are now different. The original one was N2 underscore item set underscore pal2. But then we made this one in the module folder. Now this one has an ending of PAL20. And then the one we made in the campaign folder is also set up as PAL20, okay? But what we want to do is we want to set this blueprint to have the exact same resref as the one from the base game, okay? Now to do that, we're going to come over here and you're going to see a resource name, a tag, and a template resref. Right now they're all the same except for the resource name, which is PAL20 at the end. We want to change that to PAL2, okay? Now the reason we want to do that is because if this blueprint is called from script and somewhere else, for example, like maybe there's a create item script somewhere else that wants to create another Helm of Graham the Mouse, it's going to create this blueprint, but it's going to use the one in the campaign folder because, like I said, the ones in the campaign folder take priority over any of the same named files in a module or the same named file in the install folder, okay, of the main game. That's why we want to keep it the same, because every time you use a create item script, it's always going to look for the resref, okay? So let's keep this one to PAL2 instead of PAL20. Now, 9 times out of 10, the resource name, the tag, and the template resref on base items are always going to be the same, okay? But there's always that 1 time out of 10 where the tag and the resource name are not the same, okay? Keep that in mind. That's going to come into play when we start dealing with scripts, especially the create item scripts, okay? So, now once you make that change, you always got to come over to the blueprint in question. If you right click on it and go to save to file, make sure you save it. Otherwise, once you get out of this, it's not going to save. Now just look for the blueprint that you already have in your campaign folder. For now, we're using the Path of Evil campaign folder, and right there's the PAL2 item. So just click on that and hit save, and it's going to overwrite that blueprint that we made. Okay. Now, as you can see, the resref just updated. You can see the last part says PAL2. Okay, that's what we want. All right, so let's go back to that blueprint, and now let's start changing the damage reductions and the item properties. Let's do the item properties first. So if you click on this item properties field right here and then click on this ellipse button, you're going to get this window popping up right here. Now, as you can see, there's 2 properties in here. This one here, use limitation for class paladin. That just means only a paladin can use this. That's not a problem. We're not messing with that. The one we're concerned with is this one right here, damage resistance piercing 5. Like I said, in this form, it's not going to work. So what we want to do is we want to remove this property. If you come down here, there's a button called remove property. Let's just click that and get rid of it. Now, that's done as far as the item properties field goes. Just hit OK. Now if you look down here, all that's in here now is a use limitation for class paladin. That's the way we want it. Now what we want to do is move that to a damage reduction. So come up here and click on damage reductions. We still want to keep this 2. Okay, damage reduction 2. So click this ellipse right here and you're going to get another window popping up right here. Here's that property for 2. Okay, now I can tell you right now, damage reductions in this form do not stack. So if we make a second damage reduction for damage reduction 5, these 2 will not stack. So what we have to do is set this one to a specific damage type, okay, before we get this other one. Now before we change this, let's do the other one first, because remember there was a damage resistance for piercing weapons of 5. What we want to do is we want to move that to a damage reduction. So let's make a new one here. We don't want to get rid of this damage reduction 2. We want to make a whole nother damage reduction. Just click this add button here, and there it is. Click on that one, and now come over here to the right, and this is where you can edit it to change things. Now we want to make it the same as what it was in the damage resistance side, and it was damage resistance 5. So let's change that to 5. Now if you come down here to the piercings field and then click this ellipse, you're going to get another window popping up over here, and this is where you're going to add what kinds of weapons will bypass that damage reduction of 5. Okay, so we want to add 2 items here, because remember it was only resisting 5 points of piercing damage. So now that we have it in damage reduction, these piercings that we're going to put in here are the weapon types that will bypass this 5 points of damage reduction. So that means we need to put slashing and bludgeoning here. Okay, so let's add one and let's add a second one. Okay, let's deal with the first one. We'll just change this one to slashing. Okay, so we come over here to the fields and we edit it. Click on the piercing type and you're going to see this drop down arrow. Click on that and you're going to see a type called damage type. That's the one we're dealing with. Don't worry about these other ones. The ones we're concerned with is damage type. Just double click that so it says damage type, and then you're going to see the subtype field is now going to populate. This one's already got bludgeoning in it. You know what, let's just start with bludgeoning. Okay, because that's one we want already. If you want to change this, just come over here, click on this one, and another drop down arrow is going to appear, and you can click bludgeoning or piercing or slashing or whichever one you want. You can see all these elemental types in here too. We're not dealing with elemental damage, we're only dealing with physical weapon damage from damage reduction. So only bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing. So let's go back to bludgeoning. We're going to keep that one to bludgeoning. Okay, so now that one's good. So now let's go to the second damage type, and then we're going to do the same thing. Alright, damage type right here, and then the subtype. Now we're going to change this from bludgeoning to slashing. Okay, now we're good to go. So these two damage types, bludgeoning and slashing, are going to bypass that 5 points of damage. That's what that's saying. Okay, now just hit the OK button. Now you can see the piercing's now populated right here. Now the next thing we want to do is see this field right here called uses OR logic. We want to set that to true. Now the reason we want to set that to true, because that means either bludgeoning or slashing will bypass this 5 points of damage. That's what that means. If we kept this to false, that means you would have to have a weapon that has both bludgeoning and slashing to bypass that 5 points of damage. And I can tell you right now, I don't think there's a weapon in the game that has both bludgeoning and slashing. So this one we want to change for sure to true. Like I said, it's going to mean either bludgeoning or slashing will bypass that 5 points of damage. Okay? Is everybody with me, hopefully? Okay, so now, like I said, these won't stack unless they are designated as some kind of piercing weapon. So let's go back to this other damage reduction where it was damage reduction 2. Okay? So, if you remember, for this damage reduction 5, this one's essentially blocking 5 points of damage from piercing weapons. Okay? So that means if we come over here to this damage reduction 2, let's change this piercing. Let's add one in here, and there's only going to be one. This time we're only going to change it to damage type piercing. Okay, let's change this from bludgeoning to piercing. Okay, that means a piercing weapon will bypass that 2 points of damage reduction. Okay, and then we're just going to hit OK on that one. Now on this one we don't have to worry about using OR logic. This one right here, we can leave that on true or false because there's only one damage type, which is piercing. Okay, so let's recap on this a little bit so everybody understands. I know because this can get quite confusing, especially when you have two different damage reductions like this. Usually you're only going to see one damage reduction, but this one's going to be a little bit more advanced where we have two damage reductions. So what this means, we have a damage reduction 5, which is going to block piercing damage. And the reason we know it's going to block piercing damage because over here the 5 damage reduction is avoided if you use bludgeoning or slashing weapons. Okay, but if you're using a piercing weapon, it will avoid this 2 points of damage reduction. So essentially, if you're attacking this guy and he's wearing this helm, if you hit him with a spear, which is a piercing weapon, the first 5 points of that spear damage is going to be blocked by this item. But if you attack the guy with a mace, which is a bludgeoning weapon, or a scimitar, which is a slashing weapon, then the first 2 points of damage from those two weapons are going to be blocked. That's what that's saying right now. Okay? So let's just hit OK. I know this is confusing. Let's hit OK. So now it's set. Alright? Alright, now, like I said, once we get done changing things in here, we want to save it. So let's come over here again. make sure you're on the blueprint that's in the campaign folder. Right click on it, hit save the file, and then make sure you're on the one that has the right name, which is the PAL2 one right here, and save it. Okay, now we should be good to go. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the helm that's residing on this character right here, because we know the helm on this character is a bad one. Okay, and we want to replace his helm with this new blueprint that we just made. So the way we're going to do that, and like I said, I want to do this so it's save game compatible, so we're going to have to do this through script. And the way we're probably going to have to do this is to use one of these triggers that's leading up to this area. So for example, once your party comes up this little canyon right here and he's going to hit these triggers, we can probably piggyback off on one of these triggers and then add some code to it where it's going to get rid of this old helm on this character, give him a new helm with this new blueprint, and then equip that new helm on his head so he can take advantage of the damage reduction. Okay? That's what we want to do. So let's take a look at these triggers. This trigger right here, this one has a script called GTR enable map note. That is a base game script, so I don't want to edit that, so we're not going to use that one. Okay, so let's check this trigger right here. Let's see what this one is. Okay, this one here looks like a custom script that Kamal made specifically for this one, just because of the name I can tell. So if we open up that script, let's take a quick look at this one. Alright, let's go ahead and pin this off to the side for now so we have a little bit of space. And let's kick this over here. Let's take a look at this script. This one might actually work for us. As you can see, change speak method, changed attack method, set all slaves to plot true. Alright, let's see, what does this thing do? It's checking the entering object. If the entering object is not, that's what this bang means, this bang right here means, is not a PC, then return, which means it's going to end right here at this point. So all this following code right here is not going to execute. That's what that means. But if the character that enters this trigger is a PC, then it's going to continue on and with the rest of this code and execute all this. Alright, so looking down in the next code here, in this scope right here, this is the one setting the plot flag on all these characters is being set to true. Okay, and in this scope here, this is going to cause all those anti-slavers to attack your character. They're all going to go hostile. That's exactly what this one is telling you right here. We're not going to get into this stuff though. Alright, and let's see, this next line of code, this is an assigned command. This is going to make one of those anti-slavers start yelling, "Slavers, slavers!" That's what he's yelling right there. And then finally, this line of code right here is destroy object self. Once this script fires, it's going to execute all this stuff, and then it's going to destroy itself, so it'll never run again. Okay? But I can tell you right now, we're probably going to have to remove this part right here, because I'm thinking we're going to have to add some delays into this script. And we're going to get into that in a minute. And delays do not work well when you destroy the object that the script is running off of, because if you destroy the object that that script is running off of, that script is going to destroy with it. So if there was any functions in here that were set on a delayed time, they won't execute because the object just destroyed itself and it took that script with it. So let's just go ahead and comment that out for now to remind us that we're going to have to do something else to run this script, and we're probably going to do a do once. Alright, so I'm thinking we need to start adding a bunch of code after this point right here, right in here. So let's make a bunch of space in there. So we're going to add a bunch of lines of code in right here, and the reason we're going to put it right here, and instead of up here, maybe we could have put it up here. I don't want to do that because I want all my code to run after these two lines of code right here, because this is checking the object that's entering the trigger. I want that stuff to run first. So let's leave those alone, and in this declaration we're going to leave right there too, because that's being used down here in these scopes. Alright, so the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make a declaration for that specific character, this guy right here, because he's the one wearing the helm. We want to get rid of his helm that he currently has. We want to create a new helm in his inventory and then equip that helm on him. Okay, so obviously we need to set him as a declaration, and he is going to be an object. So let's go object, and then we're going to call it ONPC. Simple as that. And then equal, and then we're going to use a function called get nearest object by tag. Alright, and it's exactly what it says. It's going to look for that tag, and it's going to be to the nearest object to that trigger, okay, the owner of this script. So let's double click on that function get nearest object by tag and look down here, and let's look at his parameters. You can see there's a string here for the tag of the character, and then there's an object target, which is got a object self set up for it as a default, okay, and then there's a third one that's an integer, and it's also got an integer set up for itself as number 1. Now what this is saying, get nearest object by tag, obviously the tag is going to be the tag of the character in question. So let's do a left parentheses, and then when we're dealing with strings, remember it always has to be surrounded by quotes. So let's start it with a quote, and then let's go back over here, and then let's get the tag of this character. Right there's his tag, aka underscore ADV1. So let's copy that. Let's come back over here and let's paste it in right there, and then close it with a close quotes. And now we're going to set a comma, and now we're going to set our second parameter, and if we leave it blank, it's just going to be object self. That's essentially what we want to do. In this particular setup, object self is going to be the actual trigger, because remember the script that we're using is on this trigger. So that trigger is the object self. Okay, so we're going to leave that as is. We're going to leave it blank, so object self is going to be the default. Now this third one, you're going to see it says nth 1. That means it's the first object that it finds with that tag. So for example, let's say there's another object out there that has the same tag. If you put a number 2 in here, that means it's going to get the second nearest object with that tag. Okay, I hope you guys are following me here. So let's say, for example, this object here is going to be the first one with that tag. Let's say this guy back here has the same tag. He doesn't, but just for this example, let's say he's got the exact same tag as this guy right here. This one's obviously going to be the nearest one to this trigger. Okay, so that's going to be the first one that script is going to find. But if I put a number 2 in there, it's going to go for the second nearest object with that tag, which would be this one. Okay, that's what that number represents. Okay, so let's go back to the script, and we're going to leave it as the default of 1. Okay, so that means we don't have to add anything else to this script. So let's get rid of that comma. Let's go right parentheses and then semicolon. Okay, just like that. Get nearest object by tag with aka underscore ADV1. That's what that declaration is with that definition. Alright, now the next thing we want to do is another object. This one we're going to call this one is going to represent the actual helm that this guy is wearing. Okay, that helm. That's the bad one we want to get rid of. So let's call it old item. Okay, and then equal, and now we're going to use a new function I don't think we've used before. We're going to use a function called, I think it's called get item in slot. So let's do a filter for the word slot. There it is. Yeah, it's get item in slot. So let's double click that and pop it in right here. Now let's see what this one says. Get the object which is in creature's specified inventory slot. And it's got 2 parameters down here. It's got an integer, which is the inventory slot, and then it's got the object, and it's defaulting to object self. We don't want to use object self because remember, object self is referring to this trigger. Okay, we don't want it to refer to object self. We want it to refer to this character. So let's go back to the script. Now let's take a look at this other stuff here. In here it gives you a description of what the inventory slot means for this integer right here. And it's giving you a global right here that starts with the words inventory underscore slot. You can tell it's a global because it's all caps. And so if you come over here to this globals tab, and yeah, keep it filtered for the word slot. If you scroll down a little bit, here's what it's talking about. You got inventory slot arm, inventory slot arrows, belt, bolts, boots, bullets, and there's one called C armor. That one is different from the chest slot. When you got a C in front of it like that, that means it's a character's hide. Okay, so if there's a monster with a hide, okay, it's a creature armor. They're pretty much referred to as hides. Okay, so if you see that, do not confuse that with the chest slot. Chest slot is for your character's actual armor slot. Okay. All right, and continuing on, we have our cloak slot, and there's another one here called weapon. B, weapon L, and weapon R, and it's preceded by the letter C. Again, that is creature weapon, and the B means bite. And then the next one is a creature weapon, left, referring to its left claw, and then the other one is creature weapon, right claw. That's what these are. Okay. Don't confuse these with your left hand weapon, which is this one, and your right hand weapon, which is this one. Okay. All right, continuing on, there's one here called head, and another one called left ring and neck, and then right ring. Okay, these are all the inventory slot globals. And like I said in previous videos, all these are is words that represent numbers. Okay, so if I click on this inventory slot head, it actually represents the number 0. You can see that right down here. Okay. But like I said, these names, it's easier for you to understand what these numbers mean. Otherwise, if you just put numbers in here, nobody's going to know what these numbers mean. But if you see it says inventory slot head, you can say, oh, okay, this is referring to the head slot in the character. Okay? Okay, so let's go back to this function right here. The first one is this integer, which is that inventory slot. So we're going to go left parentheses, and then we're going to go with the head slot. So let's just double click that one, inventory slot head, and put it in there. Okay? Or, if you don't want to do that, like I said, you can just put the number in there, which, remember, it was 0. You can just replace this inventory slot head with the number 0, just like that. It means the same thing. But we're going to use this global, okay? We're going to put inventory slot head so we can easily see we're talking about the head slot on that character, okay? All right, now the next parameter is going to be the creature that we're talking about. Now, like I said, it says it's defaulting to object self, but we don't want to default to object self because that's the trigger. We want to go to that character, okay? This guy right here, the inventory slot on this guy. And we already got him declared right here. Remember, we've got get nearest object by tag, and there's his tag, and we declared him as ONPC. So what we're going to do, we're just going to copy that ONPC, and we're going to paste it right there, okay? That's the object that we're referring to. And then we're done with that one. So let's close it with a right parentheses and then a semicolon. Alright, now the next one. So if we have the old item designated, so the next logical one would be, okay, we need to make the new item now. So let's make another declaration. We're going to go object. This time we're going to call it O new item. Okay, and then equals. Alright, let's clear out this filter. And let's go back to functions. Now we're going to look for a function called create item on object. So let's just look for the word called create. Let's put that in the filter. Alright, here's all the functions with the word create in it. And the one we're looking for is this one right here, create item on object. Let's double click on that one next, and we can pop it right in there. And we can open it up with a left parentheses. Alright, let's double click on that function right here, and let's slide this up a little bit so we can see this all better here. Alright, let's take a look at the description here. Create an item with the template on the target's inventory. Alright, now let's take a look at all the parameters. We got a bunch of them here. We're going to lead off with the string, and it's looking for the item template now this time, not the tag. Remember what I said earlier when we look at blueprints. Let's go back over here to our new blueprint that we made. Remember what I said about this? Sometimes, 9 times out of 10, a All these tags and resource names and these template resrefs are all going to be the same. But that one time out of 10, you're going to find a blueprint that has a different tag and a different resource name. Okay, so it's not always going to be the same. So keep that in mind. So when you're using this function, create item on object, always look for the resref of that item. So if you come up here, it's this column right here. All right. So for example, this one has PAL 20, but we want to use this PAL 2, okay? But if I wanted to use, for example, this one here in the module folder, and this one might have been different for some reason, then I'd use this resref right here, the N2 underscore item IT set underscore PAL 20, okay? But the one we want to use is this one here, which is N2 underscore IT set underscore PAL 2, okay? So we're good to go. So what we're going to do, we're just going to copy this. Since these are all the same, we can pick one of these and just copy it. And then come over here, and then since it's a string, again, it's got to be in quotes. So let's put a quote there and then paste that in there and then close quote. And now the next parameter is the target object. Now this one here also has a default of object self. Like I said, that object self in this particular script is going to refer to the trigger, but we want this item to be created on that character again, so it's going to be ONPC again, right? So let's copy ONPC and we'll put comma and then space and then paste it right in there, ONPC. Alright, now let's take a look at the next parameter. And the next one is an integer, and it's got a stack size and it defaults to 1. Obviously, this makes pretty much sense. Stack sizes, let's say I wanted to make 2 of these helms. I'd put a number 2 in here. Okay? But we only want to make 1. It's going to be defaulted to the 1, so we don't have to put anything in there. So let's move on to the next parameter. This one's a string, and then now it's called new tag. What that means, if you create this new item, you want to give it a new tag. You want to give it a unique tag. That's how you would give it a new tag. But we don't want to bother with that. We're just going to make a brand new item right here. So it's going to default to nothing. That's what these double quotes mean. It just means nothing in that string. Okay. So we're not going to change that at all. So we're going to use its default. And finally, the last one is an integer where it says display feedback. I think if you use this script on your characters that you're controlling, it'll give you a message in the message window saying you just acquired a helm or something like that. That's what that means. But if you use this on an NPC somewhere, you're not going to see that message. So this isn't really going to pertain to us. So we're just going to leave this here as the default. It's not going to matter anyway. So since the last 3 of these parameters we're not going to change, that means we don't have to bother putting them up here in our function. So we're going to get rid of that comma right there, and then we're going to make a parentheses at the end and then end it with a semicolon. Okay, so I'm thinking that should be good as far as our declarations. Okay, so now let's get into the actual meat of the scripts. What do we want to do? Remember, I said I want to get rid of his old helm, the one he's currently got. And then after that, I want to create a new helm on him with the new blueprint that we own. And then I want to equip that new helm on the character. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is destroy that old helm that he's currently got. So let's come up here to our filter. And let's look for the function called destroy object. Let's just go destroy. There we go. There it is right there. Destroy object. That's what I want to use. Let's double click that and it's going to pop it in right there. Now let's take a look at the parameters for this one. We have a object here. That's the object we want to destroy. And then the next parameter is a float, and it's called delay. Here you can put in a few seconds of delay. Let's say you only wanted to destroy an item after like 5 seconds. You'd put 5.0 in here because it's a float. Remember, floats are fractions, so you got to have like 5.0. If you just put a number 5 in there, that's going to error out because just a plain number 5 is an integer. When you're dealing with floats, you always got to have it in a fractional form. So if you're going to use a number 5, it's got to be 5.0. Okay. And then finally, the third parameter is display feedback true. Right. This is like I was saying before in your message window. If you were using this particular function on a script that's going to affect one of your own characters, you would see a message in your message window saying you just lost an item or something like that. That's what that means when it's set to true. Okay, but we're not going to worry about that because this is going to be affecting an NPC. So let's come up here. Let's start it off with a left parentheses. And the object that we're going to destroy, now we're going to use a little bit of common sense right here. The object is already declared up here as the old item. So let's copy that, the old item, and then paste it right in there. Okay? And these floats, we're going to just keep it on the default, which is 0.0. And this display feedback, we're just going to keep it on the default, which is true. So that means we don't have to add anything else to this function. So we're going to close it with the right parentheses and then a semicolon. Alright, now let's go to the next line down. Alright, so now the next thing we want to do is equip that item on the character. Okay? So what I just said there is what you want to search for as far as a function. We want to equip something. So let's come up here to the filter and let's filter for the word equip. Let's see what shows up for us. Alright, the one I'm looking for is action equip item. That's the one we want to use. As you can see, there's another one down here, action unequip item. Now when you see something that has the word action in front of it, that means it's an action that you want a particular character to do. Okay? It could be like casting a spell or moving from point A to point B or unequipping an item or something like that. Okay? That means we need to assign that particular action to a specific object so he will carry that action out. Okay? But first, let's just start with this one right here, this function right here. Action equip item. Let's go ahead and double click that and plop it in right there. Alright, now if you look down here, equip item into inventory slot. That's what it's actually doing. So let's look at the parameters here. We got the object of the item that we want to equip, and then the inventory slot that we want to equip it into. And obviously that's going to be the exact same as inventory slot head. Okay, we want to equip it to that head. Alright, so let's just go from start to finish here. The object is the item that we're actually going to equip. So let's start with that. So we got left parentheses, and it's going to be this item right here that we just created. Okay, this new one. So let's go new item. Let's copy that and let's paste that right in there. And then we're going to go comma, and then it's going to be the inventory slot, which is the inventory slot head. So let's just copy this right here, this constant, and let's plop it right in there. Okay, and that's all we need for that particular function. So let's close it with the right parentheses. But now we're not going to end this yet with a semicolon because we want to actually assign a particular character to do this action. Like I said, these actions are something that you want a character to physically do. But as you can see, it doesn't designate which character you want to do this. If you just left it like this, that would mean object self is the one that's going to actually do this. Okay? But the object self is the trigger. We don't want the trigger to equip a helm. We want this guy to equip that helm. So now that means we need to use another function called assign command. Okay? So let's come up here to filter and let's look for the word assign. Let's see what comes up. Alright, there's the one we want, assign command. Now the way we are going to use this, we actually have to put this in prior to this action function. Okay? So let's put our mouse cursor right at the beginning of action equip item, and we're going to double click assign command and put that right in there. Alright, now let's start off with a left parentheses, and now let's double click on this assign command and let's take a look at this. Assign an action to an action subject. Okay, that's exactly what I was explaining before. We want to assign this action to the subject. The subject is obviously going to be NPC. We want that character to do this equip action. Okay? So now let's look at the parameters here. We have two parameters. One is the action subject, which is the object, and then we have the action itself, and this is the action right here. Okay? Action equip item. So let's put our cursor in here right after that left parentheses, and we want to assign this action to this NPC. Okay, so let's copy NPC and then let's pop it in right there before action equip item. Let's paste it in right there, and then put a comma and a space. Now we have a function within a function. So that means we need to set a second right side parentheses over here. Okay? So keep that in mind when you have a function inside of a function like that. This interior function uses these two left and right parentheses. But this assigned command has his left parentheses right here, and then his right parentheses is going to be here. Okay? So keep that in mind when you have a function within a function like that. So in this particular setup, this means this character, ONPC, is going to equip that helm to his head slot. Okay? Now, we're not done with this, so we're not going to put a semicolon here yet. There's one more function we want to add to this. Now, when you use create item on object, it always takes the engine like a fraction of a second to create it on that object. Okay? It doesn't do it instantly. Okay? It actually takes about like a fifth of a second to create an item on an object, or if you use that in float terms, 0.2 seconds. Okay? So before we assign this character to equip that item on himself, we need to delay this command by at least 0.2 seconds, okay? Because we want to give it some time to actually create that object first. Alright? So that means we're going to use another function, and this one's going to be called delay command. So if you come up here to filter, let's look for the word delay. There it is, delay command. Now let's put that in front of all this stuff again right now. So in front of assigned command. So let's double click delay command and put it in there, and then start it off with a left parentheses. Alright, now let's take a look at this one. Delay command. Delay the action delay by F seconds. That's by float seconds. Okay, that's what it's doing. So let's take a quick look down here in the parameters. You have a float, and that's the seconds, and then the action to delay. The action to delay now is going to be all this. We want to delay this whole line right here from happening, okay, until after a fraction of a second. So in this particular case, we're going to set it for like a half a second. So let's put 0.5 and then comma. Alright? So now, same thing. Now that we have another left parentheses, because now we have a function within a function within a function. Okay, so now we have three functions right here all working together. So that means we need to add another right parentheses at the end of this one. Okay? Alright, so what this is saying, it's going to delay all this from happening by half a second. That's what 0.5 means, is half a second. Okay? I could put 0.3 in there too or something like that, but let's be safe and let's just put it as 0.5, a half second. Now, something else to be aware of, sometimes if you ever see a delay command and you see this floating here, sometimes you're going to see the letter F at the end of it like that. What that means is that this is a float. Okay, so if somebody's looking at this, they can clearly see this is a float. Now, you don't have to have that in there for this particular function to work. You can get rid of that F and it's going to work just fine. But you will see a lot of scripts have F in there, especially the global scripts. You're going to see the F in there. I just wanted to bring that to your attention so you know when you see that in one of the global scripts, you say, what the hell does this F mean? All that's saying is this is a float. Okay, it does not need to be there. But it's just giving you a little reminder that this is a float, okay, not an integer or some other craziness like that. So we're just going to leave that F right there for now, okay? Alright, now the next thing I want to do, let's go back to that blueprint. Let's pin this off to the side here. Let's click on it so we can see all of the properties. Now there's one other thing I want to do. If you look at this blueprint and look at this one that says identified, you can see it's set to true. What that means is this item is going to be set to identified initially, okay? When you create this item on that character, it's going to be set to identified. But what we want to do is we want to make it unidentified. So when the character kills this guy and this guy leaves his loot bag on the ground and you pick it up, I want it to be set as an unidentified item, so you have to use an identify spell on it or a character with a high lore skill to identify it. Okay, I just don't want it to be automatically identified to your main character when you pick this item up. Okay, so let's go ahead and pin this off to the side again and make a little bit of space here again. So the next thing I want to do is I want to use something called set identified, I think it was, but let's just go ahead and filter for the word identified. It'll probably just come up with the first 5 letters. Yeah, see this one? There's one that says get identified, and there's another one called set identified. This set identified is what we want to use. Okay, so let's go in here, put the mouse cursor in there, and let's go set identified. Set identified, and that's going to pop it in right there. Now let's take a look at this one. There is 2 parameters for this one: the object in question, the item, and then there's an integer, and it's a boolean. Is it's going to be identified true or identified false. Okay, remember, like I said, it's currently set to true, which means it's going to be identified, but we want to change it to false. Okay, but now I'm almost positive if this is set to identified false before you attempt to equip it on the character, it will not actually equip on the character, because you can only equip identified items on a character. Now, I might be wrong on that. I might be wrong, but I'm almost positive that that's the case. So that means we cannot set this to identified false until after it is equipped on the character. So that means we need to set another delay on this action. Okay. But first, before we use the delay, let's deal with the set identified function first. Let's open it up with the left parentheses. Now the object in question is going to be the item, the new item. Okay, so let's go new item. Let's copy that and let's paste it. And then the second parameter is going to be either identified true or false. Okay, as you can see in my previous videos, I think I said if you see a declaration that has the letter B in front of it, that's a boolean. Booleans are true, false. Okay, that's what a B means. Alright, but in this particular case, we want to set it to false. Now, you don't have to use false. You can use the number 0, because remember, false is 0 and true is 1. So you can put the 0 in here. But like I said, it's more clear when you actually use the word false. Okay, we're setting this identified property to false right here. Okay, that's what we're doing. So now that's that. Let's close it with the right parentheses. Now we're not going to, before I forget, now that we're done with this line up here, let's close it with a semicolon. Okay, alright, now let's get back down here to set identified. We're not done with this one yet, because remember I said I want to put it on a delay. Okay, I don't want to change it to identified false until after it has been equipped on the character. So sometime after half a second. That's what we want to do. So let's copy this part right here and let's paste it right in there, and then we're going to close it, like I said, with another right parentheses. Now in this case it's going to be done, so we can go ahead and put a semicolon in there, but we're not going to use a half a second on this one. We're going to change this one to an even second. Let's just do that. Okay, I could do something like 0.6 or 0.7 or 0.8 or 0.9. That's fine too, but let's just keep it in half a second intervals. Okay, so what this means now, once this script fires, it's going to destroy the helm that's currently on this character, and in a half a second after this script executes, this line of code is going to fire. Okay. Now that's another thing I need to bring up about delay commands. When you see a delay in something like that, this is not going to fire until a half a second after this entire script completes everything. Okay? Okay, I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about. This does not mean a half a second from now, from when the engine reads this line of code. It does not mean a half a second from that point is when that's going to fire. That is not what that means. This delay command means this line of code is going to fire after this entire script has executed. Okay? So there could be a ton of things in this script going on, and it might actually take the engine a full second to execute it, that there's so much junk in there. So that means a second, after a second of that script going through all this stuff in the engine firing, a half a second after that point, then this is going to fire. That's what that delay command means, okay? Alright, so now that we got that sorted out, now there's one other thing I want to do. Remember we said we're not going to use this destroy object self down here. We're going to use a different method in here. And like I said, we're not going to use this because of the fact that we're using delays. Okay? Because if we use this destroy object self, that means it's going to destroy the object that carries this script, which means it's going to destroy this script as well. And like I said, these delays don't fire until this whole script has executed. Alright? So that means this thing here would have destroyed itself before these lines of code would have fired on their delay. Okay? That's why. Now I have seen this actually work before, but in this particular case I don't recommend using destroy object self if you're using delays. If we're not using delays, or if we're not using conversation files, that's another one I don't recommend using destroy object self. If you're not using delays and you're not using conversation files, then yeah, this method is fine. It's just going to destroy the script, so it's going to destroy this trigger, which in turn means it's going to destroy this script, which means you're never going to execute this again. Okay? So what we want to do, instead of destroying this trigger, we want to set this to a do once. Okay? Now what I mean by that is, let's come back up to this line of code right here. See this if statement? If the character that enters this trigger is not a PC, that's what this bang means, is not, and then get is a PC, so that all this together means is not a PC. It's going to return, which means it's not going to execute any of the following code. I kind of want to use that again. Okay, we're going to do something new that I don't think I showed you guys before. Let's make a couple spaces in here. In an if statement, you can put multiple checks, okay? And you can use these things called operators. Now, there's an operator called and that's using these ampersands. You could use this one, a double ampersand like that. That means and, okay? But the one we want to use is an operator called or, and what that is two pipes. So it looks like that. Now when I say pipes, it's the key that's above the enter button on an American keyboard. I'm not entirely sure if it's there on a European keyboard, but you'll see it's a pipe. It's the backslash button. So if you hit shift backslash, it's a pipe. Okay, it's a double pipe like that. That represents or in code. Okay, so now I'm going to add another function to this if statement, and it's going to be get local int. Okay, so let's go ahead and filter for the word local. Alright, and the one we want is get local int. It's that one right there. So let's put the cursor in right there after that or operator, and it's going to go get local int. Alright, now let's double click on that and let's look down here. Get the object's local integer variable svar name, okay? And return value on arrow is 0, okay? This is important that you understand that. A return value on error is 0, okay? Remember, 0 also equals false, okay? Alright, now let's take a look at the properties. We have an object and we have a string, which is going to be the name of this particular variable, okay? So the object that we're going to set this on is going to be object self. So let's do a left parentheses. And it's got to be all caps, so let's go all caps lock on. Let's go object underscore self. It's always, when you're using object self like that, it's always got to be in all caps. If you have any lowercase letters in there, it's going to fail. Okay, you won't be able to compile it like that. Alright, now let's use comma, and now we want to just give this, integer a random name. I always like to use do once when we're using these do once scripts, okay? And they're always going to be in a string name. As you can see, this is a string now we're dealing with. So we got to surround it by quotes. So let's start it with a quote, and we're going to go do once, okay? And that could be anything. You can use whatever you want. It's a title that you're going to use, but we have to make sure we're using the same title in another line of code that I'm going to show you here in a few seconds. Okay. Now we're going to close that with right parentheses. Okay, let's get rid of these spaces. Now remember, in the if statement, make sure that the left parentheses and a right parentheses completely surrounds everything inside here. Okay, so we got the get is PC or get local integer of object self with the title do once. Okay, make sure they have their own parentheses in there. And what this is going to do is this is going to run and see if there's an integer with the name do once on the trigger. Okay, remember, object self in this particular case means this trigger. If it doesn't find one called do once, it's going to return as 0. Okay, which means it's going to be false. Okay, so that means it's not going to do this return. That means it's going to continue on to the rest of this code. If it does find a do once in there, that means it's going to return as true. Okay, which means it will continue on to this return. Now that's where it's going to bring us to the next line of code that we need to add in here. Let's put it in right here. The next one we're going to use is set local integer. Okay, that's this one right here. Let's double click it and pop it in right there. Now this one's going to be very similar to this get local integer, except it's now got a third value here. We still got the object and we got the string name, but now it's got an integer with the value that we're going to assign. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just copy this first part right here, this object self and do once. All right, let's copy that and let's paste it in here because that's going to be the same. Now let's put a comma in here, and now we're going to put in this third value, which is an integer. Now in this one we're going to put true, and then we're going to close it with a right parentheses and then end it with a semicolon. So now the way this is set up, if the entering object in that trigger is not a PC, or the get local integer on the trigger itself with the title of do once returns as true, then it's going to return completely out of this script. So it's not going to run this anymore. All right, the rest of this code in here, it's not going to run at all. It's going to do a complete return out. But if either of these, let's say it is a PC, or this get local int returns as 0, which is false, that means it will continue on. It's not going to do this return. Okay, we want this stuff to fire if the PC enters or this is set to false. Okay, everybody tracking so far? So now if this is set to false, that means it's going to run in and do all these lines of code here, and then once it gets down to this one, it's now going to set that object with a integer called do once to true. Okay, so that means the next time somebody enters this script, this part up here is going to return as true. Okay, everybody tracking with me so far? I know this is kind of confusing, but this is essentially a do once. Okay, that's the way it's set up. This will only fire once, the way this is set up, just like this. Alright, so let's get rid of these extra spaces right here. And let me do a quick look just to make sure everything's set up the way it is. I think it's going to be good. Now, let's do a save and compile and see if everything is good. Okay, compilation successful, so we're good to go. And it saved it in the Path of Evil campaign folder. Now, the next thing I want to do, let's add some notes to this too so we know what we did. And let's see, 4.6.21. Added code to replace the NPC's Helm with a new version, so the physical damage is correctly applied. Alright, let's see. Let's make this into two sentences here. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and save that again. Everything's good to go. This should work as intended. And again, let me make sure everything is set up the way we want it here. Alright, now this destroy objects, you know what, let's just get rid of this whole line. Let's get that out of there so there's no confusion. Alright, so we're piggybacking off of a script that Kamal already had. And this should fix the helm that character has on himself now. Alright, so let's test it in game and see if it's going to do what we want it to do. Alright, here we are in game. And now let's go into debug mode. I want to show you that trigger. Let's go to debug mode space 1. Alright, this is the trigger right here with that script that we just edited. So as soon as our party walks over that trigger, it's going to execute that script, which in turn will remove it'll destroy the old helm on that particular character, and then create a new helm in his inventory, and then he's going to, half a second later, he's going to equip that helm, and then a half a second later after that, his helm is going to be set to unidentified. Okay, so when we kill him, we're going to look in his inventory and we should see the new helm in there, and it's not going to be identified to us. Okay, so we're going to have to use a identify spell or something like that on him. Okay, so let's get out of debug mode. So we're going to debug mode space 0, and now let's see how this is going to work. We need to go through this door first, so let's come down here and unlock it. Alright, we just passed that script, so that means it should be good to go on that guy now. Now let's get through the door, and let's go through. Alright, there's all the bad guys. They're all right there. The guy in question is him right there. Let's change the view. I want to take a closer look at him. Is he still wearing a helm? Yep, he's still got the helm, because remember, we destroyed the helm that he was wearing. We gave him a new helm, and now we equipped it. That's why he's still got his helm on, okay? And it's going to be unidentified to us when we first get it. Now, let's go back into the console. Let's go debug mode space 1. And now I'm going to run a script that's going to kill all these bad guys so we can make it easier for us. So we're going to go RS and then kill _ all. Alright, now let's get out of debug mode. So debug mode space 0. And let's get out of that. And then let's unpause it. Now everybody's dead. And the guys that are not enemies are running off. Alright, now let's take a look at this guy's inventory. There was this guy right here. Let's look in his remains. There's the helm. Now you can see it is unidentified. So let's grab that. Let's look in our own inventory. And let's pass it off to our mage, who's got the identify spell. And let's identify it. And now let's take a look at it. Shazam, there we go. Now you can see we got a damage reduction 2, which is bypassed by piercing weapons, and we have a damage reduction 5, which is bypassed by bludgeoning and slashing weapons, and it's still only usable by paladins. This will work. I actually tested this off camera. This works. This works great. Okay, so with this helm, once it's equipped on somebody, if somebody attempts to attack the character with this helm with a spear, for example, which does piercing damage, the first 5 points of that spear damage is going to be blocked. Whereas if somebody attacks this same character with a mace, which is a bludgeoning weapon, or a scimitar, which is a slashing weapon, then the first 2 points of damage from those weapons are going to be blocked. Okay, that's exactly what all this stuff means now. Okay, so this is done. We're good to go. I'm actually happy with the way this turned out. Alright, so if you guys got any questions, please leave it in the comments below. And please leave a like. All that stuff helps me out too. Alright, I think that's about it. Let's go ahead and end this one here. We'll see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.